want to thank you for watching this brief 10-minute lecture. This lecture is going to be about social contract theory and how we arrive at a social contract. The majority of this lecture will be taken from the Leviathan from Thomas Hobbes, though not entirely all of it. I'll be incorporating some ideas and showing how we move from a pre-moral state and a pre-social state to a social state. So this is social contract theory. Okay, the first thing to recognize in social contract theory, we want to be able to define sort of the limits of this territorial jurisdiction. So this border, like the border of a state, for example, in the state of Florida, the border that demarcates Florida from Georgia is represented by a line, right? So this border is known as the domestic or the territorial jurisdiction. Okay, so this is going to be our domestic jurisdiction. This phrase comes from a later scholar, Hannah Arendt, and she talks about the domestic jurisdiction. We'll get into that and the signification of that later. Within this, what we have are resources. We'll label resources with an R. These resources are going to be limited. There will only be so much water that's available. There will only be so many fruits that are available, and so on. Anytime there is a limitation on resources, combined with egoists, or individuals, hold on one second. Anytime there are limitations on resources, combined with egoists, there's going to be competition over these resources, right? So, for example, these two egoists will meet and they will want to compete over the limited resources that exist. The stronger of the two egoists will win out, the other one will die out. It's important to understand that with respect to social contract theory, or with respect to social theory in general, not even specific just to social contract theory, that we can make demarcations, distinctions between types of individuals. You can have what's known in the Hobbesian sense as a psychological egoist, P-S-Y-C-H-O, psychological, and a psychological egoist is motivated out of self-interest. This individual is motivated for self-preservation, for selfishness. The psychological egoist is only interested in him or herself. There are other types of individuals that we can discuss within society. You can talk about individuals that are known as altruists. Altruists are defined in two categories. The first type you can discuss is what's known as the ideal altruist. And the second type that you can discuss is known as the moderate altruist. The ideal altruist is only concerned with others. So, for example, if you have the relationship between two individuals, individual 1 and 2, the altruist is only concerned with others. The ideal altruist is only concerned with others. So if this is the ideal altruist is only concerned with others. The moderate altruist is both concerned with others and with him or herself, which is in stark contrast to the egoist, because as you can see, the egoist is only concerned with self. So this is a representation of egoist, not concerned with the other, only concerned with self. The ideal altruist is only concerned with others, and the moderate altruist is both concerned with others and with the self. So you can think conceptually, let's just imagine within any society that we have a mix of altruists and egoists, right? And they're mixed about. If the altruists and egoists meet, what would that coupling look like? So for example, we'll imagine that an altruist have just enough water for his or her survival. The altruist meets the egoist, what's the coupling going to look like? Well, the egoist will come to the altruist and say, hey, you know that last bottle of water that you have, for yourself, I'm in dire thirst, can you give it to me? And of course, being the altruist, always giving to others, well, they'll give them the water. Eventually what ends up happening is that the altruists they can't survive in a state like this. All that's left then will be the egoists, and they'll all be competing, all of them amongst each other, for these resources. Since the nature of the resources is limited, there will never be enough resources for all individuals, and that's debatable. But for the most part, there won't be enough resources for all individuals. And what ends up happening out of this, the first thing that we need to recognize is that competition emerges. So the first point is that competition emerges competition is going to emerge because of the limitation of resources. Since these resources are limited and individuals are competing for these resources for sustenance, eventually what will end up happening is that competition is going to arise. With respect to conflict analysis and resolution, you can realize then that this competition is going to be sort of prima facie the fundamental or original source of conflict. So prior to even the formation of society, prior even to sort of the establishment of moral theory and morals, competition will arise anytime you have individuals competing over limited resources. And this is a classic case of competition and how that emerges into full-blown conflict. A lot of my students, a lot of the students that I teach will later go on to do work with the UN and NATO and so on. And it's important to recognize how this works, right? This isn't just a theoretical stance. This actually applies to sort of modern day practice. You'll have a government that recognizes that there are limited resources, and either it's going to be the case that the government is going to appropriate these resources to the individuals, which is a form of socialism, or it'll be the case that private individuals will appropriate these resources and make profit, which is obviously a form of capitalism. So there's a lot that can be built on sort of this conceptual framework.